My name is Paul Peterson, and I'm Drew Peterson's brother. Drew was quite the character growing up. He was 6 years older, but he was always there for me as I was younger when I needed him. I kind of looked up to him. He went in the service. He was an MP, and he was a guard and a sniper guard for President Ford. I was just proud of him.
That guy is my brother-in-law, Drew Peterson. When I look at him here and see him as a young man, I think, he looks like a good guy there, doesn't he?
When he got out of the Army, he got a job as an officer. Drew loved being a cop. He was very good at it. That was his ambition in life, is to be a police officer.
Drew was doing really well. He had gotten awards, he had gotten a commendation. He was well thought of and very successful police officer.
A lot of people are married to men who have some sort of positions of authority. They're like, well, I mean, my husband would never do that. But he's got a problem with stability and monogamy. He had 3 troubled marriages. Carol Brown was Drew Peterson's first wife. They were high school sweethearts. Vicki Connolly. She was 23, he was 28. They were married for about 9 years. They had no children. But now, all eyes are on his 3rd wife, Kathleen Savio.
Despite all of his personal issues, Drew Peterson is pretty much respected in the community. And, you know, although he does have some issues with his current wife, Kathleen Savio, they do have 2 small boys. And people are thinking, well, maybe this one's the one that's really gonna work. But when he met a hotel clerk one night on his rounds as Sergeant Peterson, all that was gonna change, because there behind the counter was 16-year-old Stacy Kales.
Stacy was a beautiful young girl and had really big plans for herself. And she worked nights at a local hotel. Drew Peterson would come by her work at night, chat with her as she worked at the front desk of the hotel. And they developed a relationship.
Stacy turned 17. And she's like, hey, you wanna come over? I go to her apartment. It's fully furnished. She's like, oh, Drew's gonna stop by. You're gonna meet Drew. Oh, here comes Drew. He's older, and he was married. That's what bothered me. Stacy did tell me that he was married to Kathleen Savio. There was something with the monies or whatever. That part wasn't done yet, because obviously he wasn't divorced. I thought it was a fad, but the next thing you know, she was pregnant.
He was 30 years older than she was. But from Stacy's point of view, she's out on her own. She doesn't really have anything. This guy's given her a place to live. He's given her a car. He's given her financial stability. It's understandable that she would go along with this.
Our childhood growing up wasn't the greatest.
Stacy's mother had her own demons. She just like disappeared one day. She left the house with her Bible and never came back. Stacy was like 14 or 15 at the time.
The struggle we had as kids was terrible. Me and Stacy always just stuck together.
After dating Stacy for 2 years, Drew Peterson finally divorces Kathleen Savio. It's finalized. That's October 10th, 2003. 8 days later, he marries Stacy. Their son, Anthony, was not quite 3 months old.
So now Stacy is my sister-in-law. It was kind of strange at first to have her be a part of the family, because here she was so young.
She wanted to have a family that we never had growing up.
Later on, she had Lacey, she named after a sister who had died when she was a baby. And so she had 2 of her own children. But Stacy had Drew Peterson's 2 children to raise as well. She treated them like her own 2 biological children. So she was just shy of her 21st birthday, and she is a mother of 4.
He did try to make her happy. We as a family really didn't get to know Stacy until after the marriage. But what we could see in Drew's relationships, it was this pattern of behavior, abusive behavior. Stacy was starting to see this behavior. He ruined so many lives. I remember this picture. I remember being there for that picture. This picture where she is smiling and happy. This is what we all know. This is what we all loved. And in that moment, she was happy. I think she thought that she could make it work out. She told me, she says, I see you and Paul, and I keep thinking, why can't I have that with him? Because they were brothers. Why? She did have a dysfunctional background. So that when my brother-in-law came around, she didn't have the wherewithal to know to be careful of him. During one of the family parties, I saw a bruise on her hip, and I asked her where she got it from, and she wasn't one to hide the things that he did. She says, Drew pushed me up against the TV and gave me a bruise. There were things that we were seeing, but nothing that was so horrendous that we could, say, oh my God, you need to get out.
I did see him shove my sister one time. Like, complete launched her across the room. It just made me afraid. One of the kids saw it, and I just took the kids outside. I didn't play it off like nothing happened, but didn't want the kids to see that.
Any kind of domestic violence is about power and control. And that's what he did. And he did it within the realm of his job. There was some issues in his job that I believe that he got a little carried away with his power and control.
My name is Pastor Neil Shorey, and I counseled Drew and Stacy Peterson in 2006 and 2007. It was a large church, so I was the counseling pastor for the whole church. I probably knew both of them better than anybody else knew them in the church. I recall my first meeting with Stacy after a service one day on a Sunday. We met at a coffee shop right down the street, and she said that often Drew had some jealousy, but it was okay because it really just meant that he loved her a lot. But I knew that something was wrong. It didn't seem like a healthy marriage. One of the times I met with Drew and Stacy at their kitchen table, she said, I went to see my sister who was dying of cancer. And when she came home, Drew held her against a wall, and he forced her to take articles of clothing off, and he accused her of being with another man. And she told me this in front of him. And I remember thinking, I cannot believe that I'm hearing this right now. And I glanced over at Drew, and he just looked cold. There was no affect. It was like looking at a reptile. He just stared ahead. And after she said that, she started sobbing. He stands up, and he said, well, I think that's about enough for me now. Thanks for coming. And he reached out, shook my hand, and walked out of the room. And he left me sitting there with Stacy at the table. And I remember thinking, I've got to get out of this house as fast as possible. And I remember at one point praying with Stacy at the table, and I literally kept my right eye open when I prayed, which is not anything I would ever do. because I think he was trying to intimidate me in that moment.
It is so incredibly rare that an abused person would describe their abuse to a third party in front of their abuser. So if Stacey Peterson was being abused by Drew, this was astounding. It just begs the question, was it a cry for help?
Stacey never told me that she was planning to leave Drew, but I believe that she probably was. I remember she said, "What do you do when you're married to a police officer?" I think it's very, very understandable for someone who's married to a police officer that's 30 years older than she is, that she would sort of feel hopeless and stuck. She started to walk me towards the front door. We walked down the hallway, and I remember looking to the left, and that's where Drew had a home office, and he was standing behind his desk, staring. And both of his hands were behind his back. And it was very, very odd. And I walked up towards him and I slowly stuck out my hand to shake it. And he left his left hand behind his back and he pulls his right hand out and he shook my hand with no emotion. And that was the last time that I saw Drew.
So this is the situation heading into the holidays of 2007. Drew and Stacey have now been married for about 4 years, and she is just barely out of her teens at this point. She is feeling very stifled. He is feeling super jealous, and the whole thing just looks like it's a tinderbox waiting to explode. And all Stacey's sister Cassandra could do was sit by and watch as the only person who'd ever been there for Cassandra basically had the walls close in around her.
She goes, "I'll make dinner, come over." I went over there and Stacey asked me how I felt about her getting a divorce. I said I was scared. Drew was very controlling. I looked at her and I said, "Let's go, grab the kids, let's get out of here." And she said she couldn't because Drew was the breadwinner and he would take her kids. My heart sunk. I felt helpless.
This is something that we've heard time and time again. Isolation, financial control, all of these things. Stacey must have known how hard it would have been for her to get a job and support 4 kids. So she really must have felt trapped.
A few days after, October 28th, 2007, me and my sister had plans to paint our good friend's house. So I had called her, and she never answered her calls from me, which is not normal. Well, I stopped by the house. There was no cars in the driveway. I knock on the door. One of the kids answers the door and said, "Mom left, Dad's out looking for her." Didn't know what to do. I just said, "F it, I'm gonna call Drew." Drew answers the phone. He's out of breath. I can hear keys jingling. He's just ranting about my sister. I just knew something was wrong.
Drew didn't seem all that concerned about his missing 4th wife, Stacey. It was like, she took off with another man. She took $25,000 from a safe at home, and she's on a spending spree, and she's with another man.
He had said she left with a boyfriend. My sister didn't have a boyfriend. She wasn't allowed to have any friends with Drew.
Cassandra Kale's worst nightmare is coming true. The one person who has always been there for her, her sister Stacey, has vanished. Worse yet, she believes that her husband, a police officer, is behind it. But where do you go when you suspect a cop of committing a crime?
Drew was the sergeant of the Bolingbrook Police Department. I didn't know what else to do, and then I just drove to Illinois State Police District 5.
It was a Monday morning. I had just gotten to the office, and Cassandra Kales reported that her sister, Stacy Peterson, was missing. I got to meet Cassandra Kales and had the opportunity to talk to her.
So I'm telling this guy Drew had did something to my sister.
The fact that the family alleged that a police officer was involved in her disappearance, that made this more of a significant event. But Stacy had not been gone that long, so at the time it was decided that we would wait.
For 3 days, I felt law enforcement were not doing anything. And I didn't know what else to do. And I said, call the news.
23-year-old Stacy Peterson's family reported her missing on Monday.
23-year-old Stacy Ann Peterson is the wife of a patrol sergeant here with the Bolingbrook Police Department.
It blows up and becomes a national news story.
State police say they're searching specific areas for the wife of a Bolingbrook police sergeant. So far, no new clues have been found.
Every national news organization was there. People always ask, why was there so much attention to this particular case? It's $1 million question. Stacy was beautiful, she was young, but her husband was a police officer and was much older than her. And I think that that played into the suspicion. It had a lot to do with money, greed, sex, power. I mean, all the elements are at play here.
After the first 3 or 4 days, we sent investigators to Bolingbrook to interview Drew Peterson. He said that he had also gone out and searched for her that evening to no avail. We also sent crime scene technicians along to the Peterson residence, which Drew voluntarily gave consent for us to do. But there was little to no physical evidence.
At the very beginning, Drew was hiding.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry.
He taped typing paper up over all his windows and his door. He would only open it, maybe an inch and peek out with one eye. But it wasn't long after that he was wallowing in the media, wallowing in the limelight. He loved it.
Please go home. Please leave me alone. Please don't get involved in my little world.
What's going on today?
Yes.
We went to McDonald's. They had Happy Meals and the Grimm sandwiches. How's that? And that's what's going on today.
He'd come outside with his own camera. And so while the media's filming him, he's filming them. He taunted, he played games with the press.
Watch this.
He loved the media attention.
I'm gonna come camp myself in front of your house and see if you like it.
He'd go on the morning talk shows, on the broadcast networks. He was, just loving it.
I believe I was a suspect from the beginning when they first started talking to me.
My name is Joel Brodsky. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Chicago, Illinois.
Why did you agree to do this interview today?
There's a lot that's unknown about Drew Peterson, and a lot that's unknown about the case, and a lot that I've been silent about for the last 10 years that I finally want to get out there. They tried to put a gag order, but I think enough time has gone by. I don't consider myself bound by that gag order anymore.
Do you remember where you were and what you were doing when you first heard the name Drew Peterson?
So I had heard about it. But what really brought it to my attention was when my wife downstairs, she yelled up, says, "Joel, Drew Peterson's on the Today Show."
So I think this was fabricated, as a lot of things have been.
My first thought was, what an idiot. I mean, the first thing you tell your client is, if he's under suspicion for a crime is, shut up.
If there was anything that happened to her, it should be found out.
And then at the end, Drew asks for a lawyer. I come home that evening and my wife said, you know what? I called the Today Show and I left your name and number. So okay. 2 days later, he called me and he gave me a corner about 2 blocks from where he lives. He goes, just drive there and wait, I'll be there. And we talked for about 45 minutes. After that, Drew said, yep, I want you. And from that point on, I was Drew's lawyer. But every morning I would tell him, stay away from the media, don't talk. Drew was like a moth to a flame. He couldn't stay away. And every afternoon I would see his face on the TV talking to the media.
Well, I think all the people who are pretending to be my friends that come out, I think they were all financially motivated.
Drew's idea was the media to him was like a toy. He liked messing with them.
Can you make it simple?
Sooner or later it became, if you can't beat them, join them. I think it's time to let it go.
By this time, the search for Stacy was turning from a rescue into a recovery of potentially a body, and with Drew Peterson as the prime suspect. The investigators really started to drill down on the night of October 28th. And by using his cell phone and the pings to local towers, they were able to determine that he drove a little less than 15 minutes away from his home late on a Sunday night to the Illinois-Michigan Canal. Now, why would anybody be out at midnight driving to a desolate canal, a place where you could dump anything, like a body?
We believe, based on phone records, that Drew Peterson drove to an area near the canal. We had teams that were actually doing extensive searches, that were searching the forest preserve, lots that were abandoned, areas along the canal.
Officers searched on land and by boat. They used dogs. They were looking for clues in areas where investigators believe Stacy's body may have been left. There was reportedly cell phone activity from Stacy's phone in this area.
The canal is the most unforgiving environment in the area. It's the perfect environment to hide a body with all the debris that's located there. But there was nothing.
I talked to one of the divers who told me that it was futile. That diver told me he thinks it was really done for the publicity to show people that they were trying to do something more than anything.
Investigators tackle a problem from all angles, and so while the divers are down looking for a potential body, the investigators are actually looking at Stacy's last movements before she disappeared. And lo and behold, they discover that a few months before she vanished, she'd been in contact with a guy that she liked in high school.
Investigators pull the phone records, and Stacy had several phone calls and text messages to Scott Rosetto.
Scott hadn't heard from her in a long time, and then all of a sudden, in the fall of 2007, he hears from Stacy. She's not happy in her marriage. They start texting a lot, and they meet up a couple times.
Drew suspected that there might be something more to the relationship, and Drew was probably correct on that. Scott Rosetto was interviewed several times by investigators.
Most of the time we were together was her just talking about, like relationship type stuff. She said she wanted a divorce and that it didn't work out.
The initial theory was that Drew discovered these racy text messages between Stacy and Scott Rosetto. In the fall of 2007, like August, September 2007,
Scott said that Stacy reached out to him out of the blue, that she found his number and gave him a call. They went out to a Denny's for lunch together. He said Drew showed up, which was strange in itself. He was very likely tracking Stacy's movements.
They really were flirtatious. But Scott never went there, he says. He had a girlfriend, right? But Drew, he's surveilling her, he's stalking her. He's in uniform, and he kind of stares at Scott. It was very intimidating. He asked for some identification.
So you have to picture this from Scott's point of view. He's sitting across from this beautiful girl, and sure, there'd been some text flirting, you know, going on, but then suddenly, in walks this cop, service pistol and everything, and he demands ID. What does he want ID for? And then he realizes, terrific, this guy's now got my address.
Stacy was very upset. She walked out with Drew and then came back in, very upset. The last time they texted was like 11 o'clock or so that Sunday morning, and she didn't answer any texts after that. But when Stacy disappeared, Scott Rosetto was at work. So he had an alibi. He was at work on Sunday, October 28, 2007.
Investigators don't have much to go on. They don't have tips and leads, and this is starting to look like a dead end. When out of the blue, of all places, they get a heads up from the Chicago field office of the FBI. It turns out a tip was called in about a guy who might know something. And it turns out the guy's in the hospital after having tried to kill himself.
Another person that we were interested in talking to was Drew Peterson's stepbrother, Thomas Morphy. The first interview was done from a hospital room. He needed medical help, and he felt very guilty about what he had done.
Tom Morphy was so upset over what he believed he had assisted in that he actually tried to kill himself the next day or so. He took a lot of pills and landed in the hospital.
And according to Morphy, he helped Drew Peterson remove something from the bedroom, down the stairs, and into the four-wheel drive SUV.
Tom Morphy honestly knows he helped after the fact carry my sister out of that house. And that's why Tom tried killing himself.
So now we might actually have something. Stacy was petite, 5'2", 100 pounds soaking wet, so she easily could have fit into a container like the one Tom Morphy was describing. At the same time, the media is out there like a hungry pack of tigers, and suddenly there's this raw piece of meat. Every reporter out there wants to know more about this blue container.
Drew Peterson denies reports that a relative helped him move a container that held his missing wife's body.
The media laser focused in on the blue container because we had nothing else to go on. It was the only clue we had.
Everybody is talking about this blue container, but Drew Peterson vehemently denies Morphy's account.
Relative of yours saying he helped carry a rectangular container out of your home on October 28th.
I have no idea what anybody's talking about like that.
Warm to the touch.
Nope.
He says he believes that he helped you dispose of your wife's body. Can you at least respond to that?
No.
Not at all.
Drew Peterson had motive to kill Stacy Peterson because of an imminent divorce where he could lose his home, and he felt she was having an affair with Scott Rosetto.
Stacy was a very sexy, at that point, 24-year-old woman. And Drew was jealous. I think there was just something really bizarre and dangerous about Drew.
We learned, after looking into the background of Drew Peterson, that he had been married several times before. We learned that Drew was sometimes violent and that there was definitely marital issues.
Carol Brown was Drew's first wife. She was great. I was a freshman in high school and she was a senior. And she sat at the cool table, so that first freshman year of school was very cool because I was Carol's future brother-in-law. And it was sad to see them get divorced because she was a really good person.
In 1974, the last thing that anyone would think is that Drew Peterson would become a household name. There are almost no photos of Drew and Carol together, but in their wedding photo, which was later published by the Chicago Sun-Times, they certainly do look happy.
There was no indications of any kind of domestic violence. But in my opinion, when you're speaking with someone of Drew's nature, a narcissist at their core, they're not going to really pay any attention to what other people think. As long as he was happy, that's truly all that mattered. With narcissists, it's almost like they can tell that someone is open to their manipulations, either through trauma or upbringing.
Drew Peterson's second marriage was to a woman who at the time was Victoria Retkavitz. She was 23, he was 28. They were married for about 9 years. They had no children.
Drew was incredibly controlling with her, but she had a big personality, which was a little bit different than some of the other women that he had married. So I think that there was a lot of contention in that relationship because Vicky stood up for herself.
She just wanted out. She didn't want anything from him. I think that's what allowed her to walk out of the marriage. And before he's even done with his divorce from Vicky, he meets Kathleen Savio. And they're already together, and he's introducing her to the family, and he doesn't tell her he's married. He makes it seem like he's single.
I am Nick Savio, the youngest brother of Kathleen Savio. I remember her going on dates with him, and I remember the day that she told Dad she was going to get married to him. And I remember Dad saying, "I'm not walking you down the aisle." Dad didn't care for Drew. He said, "You never bring him around, and all of a sudden you're marrying him. Why are we such in a rush here?" And I guess come to find out that she was pregnant. And I think she was just in a rush to have kids to start a family, and I think Drew was able to give that to her. They have 2 children, but Kathleen became isolated, became not the person that we knew. It's a hard picture to swallow. And she would say things, "It's not that bad." Well, it definitely is. She would go to parties with black eyes, try to cover up makeup, and maybe say, "I hit a curb." We all knew what was going on. You don't get a black eye from just falling down. It doesn't work that way.
Drew Peterson claims that he never hit any of his 4 wives, that it would have put his job as a police officer in jeopardy. But there are studies from that time period that suggest 40% of law enforcement have families or wives who actually experience domestic abuse. So it's a little hard to take that argument seriously. But that's the exact case that he brings to the media, and a perfect example of that is his appearance on CNN's Larry King in 2008.
If I get involved in a domestic situation where I'm physical with a wife, I'll lose my job. And I would never even care to even come close to risking that.
People have to think, well, what is going on with his family that they couldn't do anything? Drew had different categories of people in his life, and he kept them separated. And so, because we weren't all part of one group, we couldn't compare notes. And in going through all of this, we learned all of these things that had been going on that we weren't aware of.
I think she lost all hope and everything. We believe that the people he worked with covered up for him for a lot of years there.
Kathleen Savio and Drew Peterson's marriage certainly had its ups and downs, like many marriages, but they had 2 beautiful boys. They had a nice house on a street in a safe Chicago area suburb. He had a good job. So it's sort of odd how you could just be going about your life and then something so incredibly random just comes in and upends it.
Stories came out that my sister was being cheated on.
She got a letter.
The anonymous letter. Somebody cared enough to actually send this to her. You are probably well aware that your husband is having an affair. You may already have all this information, but if not, you will need to deem it to prevent any further embarrassment and disgrace to you and your family. This affair has been going on for several months. Because of her age 17 and because of Drew's age and his occupation, he holds a position of authority over her. Drew could be charged criminally for this intimate involvement with this minor. My sister's worst fears come to fruition, but it had to be confirmed from an anonymous letter that her marriage is basically over, falling apart. I think she was like 32, 33, and this girl's 16 years younger than her. And that's really bothersome.
My name is Harry Smith, and I was Kathleen Savio's prior family law attorney. That letter she received incited Kathleen to confront him. She asked me to represent her against Drew. The Savio-Peterson divorce was extremely acrimonious. There would be fights every time there was a handover of the children. Once Drew began slamming on the horn and screaming for Kathleen to come out and get the boys from his truck. Stacy, very pregnant, is in the front passenger seat. Kathleen comes out, Stacy gets out, and the fight begins, with his children watching from car seats. Kathleen wasn't perfect. She would not back down from a fight. Kathleen attacked a pregnant woman. And mind you, Drew was a police officer during this time. So he grabbed Kathleen, put her in an arm bar, and held her face down on the front lawn of the driveway until Bolingbrook police showed up and arrested Kathleen. She was convinced that Drew Peterson was manipulating the system and that her voice wasn't being heard.
Here's the thing, sometimes divorces are so messy that judges will actually grant the divorce and allow people to move on with their lives, get married again, move across the country, etc., and then deal with the financial part afterwards. And as was the case for Drew Peterson and Kathleen Savio, they were divorced. Drew marries Stacy, but the finances with Kathleen weren't settled. And if things go the way many divorces go, Drew knows he's about to lose his shirt.
On March 1st, 2004, Drew Peterson is expected to drop the children off at Kathleen Savio's house. He arrives at the house, knocks on the door. There's no answer. The neighbors arrive as well. Drew unlocks the door. He allows the neighbors to rush in. The neighbors find Kathleen Savio dead in the bathtub.
Drew heard screams from inside the house, so he ran in, ran up the stairs, saw Kathleen dead in the tub, grabbed her, got his DNA all over her, and they called the police.
That evening, Illinois State Police investigators were sent to the Peterson home. There were crime scene photos taken of that scene. And her body was found laying in that bathtub. It was believed that she had slipped and hit her head on the bathtub, and she died from drowning.
I remember our older sister calling me at about 4 in the morning. And I remember saying, hey, your sister's gone. What? What? She's gone. They found her in the bathtub. I'm like, what? I just remember sitting there like, she's too young. Not like this.
By his account, there's Drew looking down at his dead wife in the bathtub. While at the same time, let's not forget, he is still in a lawsuit where he has to pay child support, pay alimony, split the house, and probably split his pension for the 11 years that they were married. Now he doesn't have to write those checks anymore.
As we finally prepare for trial, which Drew has avoided on 2 occasions, Kathleen has an accident and is now dead.
So when he told us Kathleen had died, we thought, well, isn't that convenient for you?
When Stacy disappeared, law enforcement immediately took another look at Kathleen's because 2 wives gone in just 3-4 years. That's like a little weird. So they took a look back at that 3rd marriage to say, maybe there is something here that we missed.
I think that the most important document we had was the autopsy report. I went to my expert, who's Dr. Michael Bodden, and I said, Dr. Bodden, please take a look at this. The fact that she was found in a dry bathtub, there was no evidence of water. And if you look statistically at the number of people who die in bathtubs, it's almost 0. All of these factors together, this looks suspicious. He said, Steph, this is not an accident. Dr. Bodden believed that Kathleen Salvio had been murdered. And literally all hell broke loose. There was pressure to exhume Kathleen Salvio's body and perform an additional autopsy.
In consultation with the prosecutor's office, we reopened the Kathleen Salvio investigation and have a second autopsy completed. During the investigation of Stacy Peterson, new information concerning the Savio death investigation came to light. And that is being looked at in great detail, which has caused the reopening of the Savio investigation by the state's attorney's office and the state police.
When I heard that they reopened this case, I had my own little anxiety attack. I remember August 31st, 2007 was my last meeting with Stacy. We met at the Starbucks down the street from the church. She looked very serious and very scared, and she just blurts out, Drew killed Kathleen Salvio in 2004. Stacy told me that there was one night when Drew walked in and he was wearing all black, head to toe. And she looks at him and she said, well, where were you? And he looked at her and he said, you know where I was. And he didn't say anything else. He just started taking his clothes off and putting them in the washing machine. He sat her down and he said, Stacy, in a few hours, the police are gonna come. And if you tell them what I tell you to say, this will be the perfect crime. I was still pretty new in my career. I had no idea of what to do in this situation. I asked her, what do you want me to do with this? And she said, I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to know. I think she was very, very concerned that the same thing was going to happen to her.
Drew had both a military background and then he had the police background. I think regarding Kathy, he took months to plan everything out. But how can a guy that meticulously plans everything out make these two mistakes? The mistake of not having Kathy cremated and not sending Stacy away for the weekend.
The family clearly was concerned because the first time they'd classified the death as an accident. So they came to me and said, well, we don't trust them. We don't trust the decision they're gonna make, because clearly the first time they didn't make the right decision. So I circled back around with Dr. Bodden and I said, would you consider doing an autopsy privately on behalf of the family? And he said, yes. The family agreed, and that's what happened. It was my first time being in an autopsy. Then I remember they brought her body up. So I stood with my back, and I remember the smell. I stayed laser focused on Dr. Bodden. I wouldn't even look down because I had a job to do. He concluded that Kathleen Savio had been murdered based on simplistic things like there was scratches and marks on her chest, on her back, and there was a big blunt force trauma on the back of the head. Then they were forced to conduct a state-authorized autopsy for their own purposes. The state had their own autopsy and came to the exact same conclusion. This became the autopsy that people really relied upon.
Somebody listened, finally. Somebody cared enough to make the right decision. Finally, something went our way.
Drew hasn't been charged yet with Kathleen's murder, but it's not looking good for him. He felt like he was Teflon. He has committed the perfect crimes. I can kill you and make it look like an accident. Now it was a homicide.
Drew Peterson was not charged yet for the murder of Kathleen Savio. We believe we had the right guy now. We now had to prove it. We did have a body, and the second autopsy determined that Kathleen Savio died by homicide, and we had the records of domestic violence.
If the state's attorney had what I would call huevos, he would have brought a charge on Stacy. But knowing the state's attorney, Jim Glasgow, if there was going to be a charge, it was going to be with Kathy Savio because there was a body.
Now, mind you, he hadn't been charged yet. Drew is appearing on these radio shows and TV shows. At the same time, a grand jury is deciding his fate and whether or not he is going to be charged with the murder of his third wife, Kathleen Savio. It was pitched to a radio station in Chicago to win a date with Drew. Can you imagine?
Drew was certainly having a good time with all of this. In fact, he'd become a regular on Mancow Mueller's top-rated Chicago radio show. It's a shock jock morning zoo show, but I don't think that Drew Peterson at any point was betting on Stacy's family listening in.
I was working and I just heard him talking on the show. I got sick of it and I just said, I'm calling in.
Cassandra?
Yes.
You're Stacy Peterson's sister?
Correct.
He was making it out to be some kind of amusement for himself. It was just disgusting.
What'd you do to my sister?
Not a thing.
You killed her after she got off the phone. Between 10:15 and 10:59. You will pay. Watch your back, Drew. Drew, just keep talking because you keep digging yourself in a deeper hole.
Well, I never heard an accused murderer going on the radio to joke about things, much less the family calling up to confront them. I mean, this was all new to everyone, I think. It was very surreal.
The mother of two has been missing Friends and relatives say they're convinced she's the victim of foul play.
We knew that the arrest was imminent and that we had to make sure that this was handled the right way.
I had gotten tips that Drew was going to be arrested. They said be at his house early in the morning.
Drew had to have known the hammer was about to fall.
The police had orchestrated a very careful arrest. They pulled him over, they got him out of the car, they handcuffed him, but he knew where the cameras were. He knew where to look, and as he was being taken off into the car, screaming and yelling things to the media.
There's a famous video of him in a red jumpsuit, and he's shackled, and he's got, you know, his wrists are also cuffed, and he's like looking up. He's looking up at like some cameras, and he's like not taking it seriously. It was like, oh my God, what's wrong with this guy?
You don't take this serious yet?
I recall Drew's arrest. Happy moment, happy. But yet he's here smiling when he's arrested. Another shot to us. He thinks he's above the law. He's gonna walk away with this. It's not acceptable to us. It never was.
Yeah, give him out, folks. I had planned to do an appearance in all 3 major morning shows in New York. The point to get across is, look, whatever you think may have happened, there's no evidence. Hearsay is not evidence. It's unreliable. That's why they usually don't let it in court. So, you know, that's it. You know, that was all we were trying to get across. I got a call just as the plane was on the runway. Drew had been arrested. So I went to New York, did the shows.
First of all, somebody that's accused doesn't have to prove their innocence. The state has to prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And everybody that's ever been found not guilty was initially indicted. So being indicted is not evidence of anything. I think the main point in this case is going to be forensic.
And then get on the plane back. He needs a lawyer.
You know, I love him, you know. If you had a family dog that was out biting all the neighbor kids, you may love it dearly, but you got to help put it away, put it down. And that's kind of how I felt with Drew.
Bail for Drew Peterson is set at $20 million, which is effectively the judge saying you're not going anywhere until this thing goes to trial. And that's where the really hard part began, because from the time that Drew Peterson was arrested in 2009, every single legal wrangling and complex maneuver, that just ate up the next 5 years.
Now, Drew Peterson's been charged, and the state is getting ready for trial. They've got to get their evidence lined up. The question is it proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and will 12 jurors be convinced?
It was going to be an uphill battle to prosecute Drew Peterson for Kathleen Savio's murder. At the time of her death, the state police didn't collect any evidence. At the time of his trial, there was no evidence, no physical evidence. Fingerprints, a smoking gun, I mean, DNA, they had none of that.
This was not a slam dunk case by anybody's standards. There were several challenges in the case. One was that the jury could never learn or become knowledgeable in the fact that Stacey Peterson was missing. I think it was the elephant in the room.
But so much of the prosecution of Drew for Kathleen Savio's death is related to Stacey's disappearance, because that's why it was reopened, because she disappeared, and jurors can't know that, right? The two were so intertwined that it had to have been a huge challenge for the prosecution. You can't always get jurors who have been living under a rock and know nothing about the case when it's high profile like this.
On July 24th of 2012, a jury is actually seated for the Drew Peterson trial. And it starts to look as though this might actually be a normal trial. But this is Drew Peterson. And anything can happen. And the media goes hog wild.
Turned into a circus again. There was this almost carnival atmosphere.
Are they trying to hassle you with a fishing expedition?
How you been?
Come on, don't give us all.
I remember the trial beginning and us getting there, and it was like a scene out of a movie. You never think you're going to be this close to cameras, all this stuff. You realize how national it really was. They were holding lottery drawings out there for people that could be at that case.
One of the most anticipated witnesses at this trial was Neil Shorey. He was Stacy's pastor and friend, and he was also one of the only people that Stacy had told about the night Drew came home and told her he killed Kathleen Savio.
Drew Peterson's defense team did not want me to be able to testify, and it was this long, drawn-out thing trying to keep my testimony out. They said, oh, it's just hearsay, it's hearsay. But the judge at the time ruled that most of what I had to say wasn't hearsay, because what he said is that based on a preponderance of the evidence, it's very likely that Drew killed Stacy so that she couldn't testify about Kathleen Savio's murder. It was extremely strange for me to be testifying on Kathleen's behalf. I think my testimony was pretty important.
I believe Neil Shorey's not lying, but I can't question the person that told him. So, look at, I say, trying to be careful here. I believe that Pastor Shorey wasn't lying. That's what Stacy told him, right? What I'm saying is that as a lawyer, I couldn't cross-examine Stacy on what her motivation was to say that.
In all, the prosecution calls 81 witnesses, but then in a surprise move, they decide to waive their right to call the attorney who was involved in both the divorce for Kathleen and for Stacy. It's an attorney named Harry Smith.
We didn't want to call Harry Smith, but Drew insisted. Drew wanted us to call him. And if we don't call a witness the client wants us to call, I can guarantee you if he's convicted, he's going to call us out. He's going to say, you guys didn't call a witness I wanted called that could give good evidence. And that's how that happened.
I testified that Stacy called me. She told me that she was considering leaving Drew and she wanted advice from me as a divorce attorney. I told Stacy Peterson that I suspected it was a conflict for me to represent her against Drew, considering my representation of Kathleen Savio. She said that was okay. She just wanted to ask me a couple of questions. And then I testified that Stacy told me within 2 minutes of asking for a divorce consult that Drew killed Kathleen. I could see the reaction of the jury when I testified. I can't believe we got the opportunity to offer that evidence to a jury.
The burden of proof is, of course, on the state. And as their list of witnesses gets smaller and smaller, the nation is on the edge of their seat. And the cameras are there to capture every moment of this drama.
It was a long trial. And then the judge gives the instructions to the jury goes back. So it's just sitting and waiting, and what's going through your mind is, well, if you've done enough trials, nothing, because you realize that there's no way to predict what a jury is going to do.
And I remember sitting outside, and there was a lot of buzz going on with the case. All of a sudden, I remember sitting around after getting lunch, we have a verdict. You got to get up to the courtroom. I remember that agonizing 15 to 20 minutes just waiting for the judge to come, agonizing and waiting for the jury to show up. You see these 12 empty juror seats and you're just like, the fate is all in their hands. You're just sitting there with this ball of anxiety. One of the worst feelings I've ever had in the world. Jury comes back, judge comes in, says, "I'll rise. Have you come to a verdict?" Jury says, "We, the jury, find defendant Drew Peterson guilty." Immediate tears. Immediate tears. It was like 8 years, somebody finally heard her. Justice may have been served, but again, it's a shame that Stacy had to disappear for this to happen.
I don't disagree with the verdict. And not long after the guilty verdict, I withdrew, resigned from the case.
As if the walls weren't closing in enough, Drew Peterson had yet to learn how many years he was going to spend in prison for this murder. His little house of cards that he'd been building all his life certainly coming crashing down.
So in February 2013, Drew Peterson is sentenced, and the judge gave him 38 years. Drew had an outburst in the courtroom.
Yes, you did.
This was a guy who was always so jocular and jovial and joking around. But the reality had to have sunk in. It's like, wow, Buster, you're going away for the rest of your life.
The Savio family could rest easy that Drew Peterson was going to pay for the murder of Kathleen. But what about Stacy? She'd been missing 5 years by this time. Was anyone ever going to be charged in her case? Cassandra must know by now that she's dead. But in our society, it's important to have a place to be able to mourn. And not only do they not know how Stacy died, they don't even have a place to lay a wreath or a flower. Drew Peterson's original trial attorney says this has gone on long enough. He says it is time for the truth to come out. And yes, lawyers and clients have a sacred bond, but so do humans to each other.
I feel very bad for Cassandra. I want her to have closure. I don't want to, go too far across the line. I want to go as far as I think I can and should. To try to, people need to read between the lines to get the closure they need. Let them read between the lines. I'm doing as much as I feel I can.
The big mysteries in Stacy's case have always been no body, no weapon. And now Brodsky seems to be giving us real clues about both of these mysteries.
They did an interview of Drew and Kathy's children.
Sit there for me, please. How you doing?
And during that interview, one of Drew's children, Chris,
Christopher Down Peterson,
talks about Drew practicing in the basement of the house with a firearm with a silencer.
did you ever hear a gun go off in your house?
Other than the time that me and my dad were practicing shooting downstairs, the basement.
You were practicing shooting in the basement?
No, he had me stand in my brother's room while he shot.
What was he shooting at?
This one, bullet thing that we wanted to test out this new silencer he got.
A new silencer?
Yeah, he just made it himself.
if I'm investigating what I believe to be a homicide, and then somebody who lived in that house talks about the person I think committed this homicide firing a silenced pistol in the basement, target shooting.
So what are you telling us about the relevance of the gun?
Well, I mean, you can, from that evidence, I think you can infer how if Drew killed Stacy, how he would have done it, because their kids were home. And if he was gonna do anything, a silenced weapon like that would be probably the best way to do it. Also, Tom Morphy was there when Stacy disappeared. He helped Drew carry a container out of Drew's house that he believed had Stacy's body in it. Morphy later on went to the authorities and told them what had happened. You know, he gave an interview that was pretty compelling evidence, really. And if the police would have done a thorough search of the house, they might have found a couple of blue containers. You know, it's all circumstantial, very circumstantial. I don't know that there was enough, you know, but you start piling these things up. Enough circumstantial evidence is enough to get a conviction.
Following Drew Peterson's conviction, the usual back and forth ensues, appeal after appeal, but you know, this is Drew Peterson. He does not give up, and he doesn't know when to stop. And there is still one major shoe to drop in this wild tale.
A story and a name you likely remember. A former Illinois police officer convicted of killing his third wife expected to appear in court today. A judge agreed to hear Drew Peterson's motion to vacate his conviction.
Drew tried to make the case that he had ineffective counsel, and that ineffective counsel was Joel Brodsky.
It's almost like clockwork, the Hail Mary. Someone who's not winning enough appeals goes after the lawyer, always. Ineffective assistance of counsel, and that's exactly what Drew did. And Brodsky was having none of it.
I'm more afraid of my one-pound dog than I am with Drew Peterson. He's a blowhard, you know, for all his swagger, you only hurt defenseless women.
Drew Peterson hadn't factored in that his one-time attorney might one day leave the profession of law. And in June of 2019, something happened that changed everything. The Illinois Supreme Court suspended Joel Brodsky's license to practice law. 2 years. It was about a bunch of unprofessional conduct charges that had nothing to do with Drew.
I'm doing consulting now. I'm doing private investigations now. I'm doing okay. I really don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to that sewer, as I called it.
So with this new freedom in 2022, Joel Brodsky makes a surprise announcement.
I had gotten a call from a reporter, and then at the end of the interview, I mentioned to him, I said, you know, I've been thinking for a while that maybe it's time I end the mystery about what happened with Stacy. Maybe, you know, revealing what happened to Stacy and where she is.
Lawyers keep secrets. That's their job. And when they don't, that's news. And that's my job. So when Drew Peterson's lawyer told News Nation yesterday that he just might commit the biggest lawyer sin there is, ratting out his client, we sat up and took notice.
No conversations, they just processed it. There's no criminal law that says that you can't talk about it. I think I have a lot more leeway than I would if I was practicing law, on one hand. On the other hand, I still want to be careful because I know a lot of secrets. I don't want people to think that, oh my God, now Brodsky's gonna say everything he knows about everybody he's ever represented. Drew is never getting out of prison. His case has been looked at by 12 different judges, all who unanimously affirmed the conviction. Drew is gonna die in prison. I think he knows he's not getting out It's time for him to do the right thing. I think I could have a decent shot of getting him to do the right thing. I'd really like to try that. This is one thing about Drew. Just to do the right thing, that's not Drew. I think if it would benefit his children, I think he would do it. But if he won't, somebody's got to.
After Brodsky's interview airs on WGN, the judge slaps him with a gag order, and that's at the request of Drew Peterson's new attorneys. But even that isn't permanent. So we're gonna find out at some point whether Brodsky is all bluster or if he really does know something that can help put Stacy's family at rest and give them closure.
I have a First Amendment right. The law is clear. I no longer consider myself bound by this gag order. So I told Cassandra as much as I could. I think that she knows that her sister is not missing. Am I willing to go to jail? I prefer not to. You know, we should put an end to this.
It could be months or even years before the rest of the story is told, but in the meantime, Cassandra is more determined than ever to bring her sister home.
If you think you know where my sister is, then let me know. Stop holding it back. He just thinks he knows. But I'm already way ahead of Joel. I already have it all. Anyways, I believe I found my sister.
I don't know if Drew Peterson will ever be prosecuted for Stacy Peterson's murder without a body.
You can prosecute people when there's no body. It's not like you can't. No body cases and convictions occur fairly routinely. But what happens if Drew was charged with Stacy's disappearance and the jurors are like, yeah, he probably did it, but we didn't feel like there was proof beyond a reasonable doubt, so we can't vote guilty, and they acquit him, and then she's found. You can never retry him.
I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind that Stacy is deceased and is out there somewhere. Cassandra has put a credible effort into trying to locate her and search on her own.
You don't understand the connection we had. I felt this whoosh go through my body. I knew Stacy was murdered. It was her telling me. That's when my mission started to go for Stacy.
Going all the way back to the time when Stacy went missing, Cassandra was really instrumental in organizing all the ground searches for her sister. But then she shifted her focus to the place 14 minutes away from Stacy and Drew's home, the place where police suspect Drew might have actually dumped Stacy's body, the Illinois and Michigan Canal.
It's a big canal. I mean, I don't know if you ever saw it. It's big. I don't want her spending any more money that she can't afford. You know, I'd like to be able to do this for her if at all possible. And I hope it becomes possible.
I don't know how often I've gone up to the canal. In this past year, I have been on the canal searching approximately 6 times with sonar and divers. I believe I found my sister. I know it's my sister. After all these years, there's amazing people out there that would show up if we needed it. That's very heartful and amazing to me. The best one I've had was a $500,000 ROV brought in, only one in the world. It had all the bells and whistles and the sonar and high-vis cameras, lights, all of that. But just being on the canal is just even more difficult. It's not easy. to fight for my sister and keep her name alive.
The mystery keeps a lot of people going because they want to find her. They're behind Cassandra. Like, we want you to find your sister. And I hope that she is found someday. So that mystery and Stacy's disappearance keeps the story alive, if nothing else.
Where my sister's remains are in the canal, it's not accessible, but me and my team are recovering her. So not only will I get my sister, I'll get the last left. Lockport is 35 miles southwest of Chicago. It's the I&M Canal that runs through there. It literally sucks the life out of me because I know she's there. So this is the bottom of the canal. We were searching with sonar and we got the live video. And if you look underneath the grabber claw, you can see a human skull upside down, the 2 eye sockets right underneath it filled with silt, and the lower jawbone fell off. You can totally see a female, round, hair waving, full body form. It's somebody. Whether it's my sister or not, they need to be brought home.
Does she have the exact place of this? What's that black thing? It's like from the camera or something? Oh. Wow. That's like right there, underneath the whatever that black thing is, right? It's a skull. Is it hers, though?
In looking at this video, that potentially could be a pelvis with a little bit of spinal column, femur bone. Almost look broken. Jagged edges there, skull. I'm actually shocked that they were able to get the photos they did of this because of the movement of the stuff down there, but yeah, here too, see, more bone. It's a pretty clear picture. It's a lot different than the technology back in 2007. This was not available back then. I would say somebody should go and take a look at this.
I want everybody to remember my sister as the most amazing woman, mother, friend, God, wife, aunt, cousin, she's just daughter, amazing. I want people to remember body form, not skeletal remains on the bottom of the canal.
The Illinois State Police say that this case is far from over and that they may actually return to search for Stacy's remains. But retrieving her body would bring so much closure to her family and might even push Drew or someone else to confess to the murder. But in the meantime, friends and family of both Stacy and Kathleen are working to honor their memories with an organization that helps women who were in the same position that Stacy and Kathleen were in.
Going through this with Stacy and not knowing what to do has definitely created so many moments for me to help other victims all over the country.
Document the Abuse came about because of what happened with Kathleen and with Stacy.
So what it does, a victim sits down and they basically tell their story so that if something happens to the victim, their story is heard in their voice if they're incapacitated or murdered.
If something happens, I can now come to court with everything in a comprehensive, cohesive manner and be able to work on their behalf.
Projects like these allow for the names of Kathleen and Stacy to live on. They also help prevent further suffering for other families who may be in the same boat. And the families of Kathleen and Stacy have both said they don't want anyone to ever go through what they've gone through, because there can always be another Drew Peterson.
On the surface, Drew Peterson seemed like a very nice guy, and he was to his children a good dad on one hand. On the other hand, in reality, he's a monster. He is probably one of the most evil people I've ever met.